material. I mean, that is just far from a graceful Disney princess-like promotion. It's far from what you would think Disney wanted.
I think Rachel Zegler was miscast. I'm not trying to be shady, but when you see the pictures of her as Snow White, you're like, that's Snow White? She doesn't look happy, she's not really smiling.
What would you say to those who are just kind of overly critiquing the film at this point? You've worked so hard on it.
I'm getting on across. Hold on. Here. Hold on.
All right. Congrats, Rachel.
That's going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars, and mainly because of her, and because nobody wanted to support her. So it got destroyed at the box office. Here's the box office numbers. The Minecraft movie made $60 million on Saturday. Snow White made $2.
Weird.
Disney's latest fairy tale adaptation didn't just stumble. It sent shockwaves through Hollywood, causing an industry-wide panic that no one saw coming. What started out as a simple live-action remake of Snow White turned into a full-blown cultural event, and not the kind Disney was hoping for. The theaters? Practically empty within days. Audiences? Curious. And the critics? Absolutely ruthless. But if you think this is just another box office flop, think again. The story behind the downfall of Disney's Snow White tells us far more about the future of Hollywood, the clash of cultural values, and the growing divide between what studios want to make and what audiences actually want to watch.
Where we can entertain responsibly, obviously we try to do that. We try to have a positive impact on the world. But the first thing we need to do is entertain.
When Disney first announced a modern reimagining of Snow White, hopes were high, with Rachel Zegler, a rising star from West Side Story, in the leading role, and a production budget soaring past $200 million. This was supposed to be one of Disney's biggest wins of the decade, but when the film finally hit theaters, reality set in like a ton of bricks. The opening weekend pulled in a mediocre $43 million, a figure that some optimists tried to spin as promising, but by the second weekend, that small glimmer of hope was gone. Ticket sales plummeted by nearly 70%, and it quickly became clear, audiences were abandoning Disney's Snow White in droves.
Saying that audiences will always line up to see her no matter what she does.
Every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
You know what's interesting about all of this is that the only person waiting in line to see Snow White was Rachel Zegler.
Globally, the movie struggled to crawl past $120 million, a catastrophic figure for a company that once dominated box offices with ease. And the audience feedback? Brutal doesn't even begin to cover it. On IMDb, the movie racked up a staggering 163,000 reviews, resulting in an embarrassingly low rating of just 1.6 out of 10. Think about that. This wasn't the usual could have been better response you sometimes see with reboots. No, this was the kind of full-blown rejection that sends executives scrambling for explanations.
Right there, zoom in right there, that's it. 163,000 rating, of which it got 1.6, not out of 5.
It was clear, something about this adaptation had completely alienated its audience. But the question was, why? At the center of the controversy was Rachel Zegler herself. When she was first cast, many celebrated her as a fresh face for a classic character. But as more promotional interviews rolled out, excitement quickly turned into skepticism. Zegler openly talked about how this Snow White wouldn't be the same helpless princess from the 1937 animated film. She promised a modernized, independent Snow White who doesn't need saving, and made it clear that the original love story would be dramatically downplayed, if not outright erased. These comments didn't sit well with longtime fans. Instead of seeing a respectful update to a beloved story, many felt they were being handed a heavy-handed political message disguised as entertainment. But casting wasn't the only problem. Snow White, in the original tale, is famously described as having skin as white as snow. While many supported the idea of diversifying classic roles, others argued that such a core physical descriptor should have remained faithful to the source material. Critics pointed out that adapting timeless fairy tales shouldn't mean fundamentally rewriting their basic premises. It created a tension, a sense that Disney wasn't interested in honoring the story, but rather using it to push a broader agenda. Just when things couldn't get more complicated, another Snow White project entered the picture, one that would fuel the flames even further. Conservative YouTuber and Daily Wire host Brett Cooper announced Snow White and the Evil Queen, a competing adaptation promising to stick closely to the classic themes of kindness, beauty, and love, where Disney's version aimed to modernize.
I say, if I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, Princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed on.
Shows you how terrible this has been. It is financially crumbling, financially failing. The reviews are genuinely horrible, and new controversies surrounding the production, surrounding the actresses in the film are literally popping up every single day. They cannot outrun. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and make sure that you are subscribed to the Brett Cooper Show channel.
Cooper's version proudly celebrated the traditional values of the original story. And with that, the stage was set for one of the most unique showdowns in Hollywood history, not just between two films, but between two fundamentally different visions of what storytelling should be. The competition between the two Snow Whites quickly turned ideological. Disney's adaptation was seen as an emblem of Hollywood's progressive politics, while the Daily Wire's project was championed by those yearning for a return to traditional narratives. Social media exploded. On one side were fans praising Zegler's willingness to question outdated tropes. On the other side were those who saw Cooper's faithful adaptation as a much-needed breath of fresh air. Comment sections, Twitter threads, and YouTube breakdowns turned into cultural battlegrounds, each side fiercely defending its vision for what fairy tales should represent in 2025 and beyond. Adding even more chaos behind the scenes were reports of major tension on the Disney set, particularly between Rachel Zegler and co-star Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen. Insiders revealed that the two actresses clashed not just creatively, but politically, particularly over the Israel-Palestine conflict. Gal Gadot, an Israeli citizen, has been openly pro-Israel for years, while Zegler has been vocally pro-Palestinian. Their opposing worldviews reportedly created a toxic atmosphere during filming, further destabilizing an already shaky production. It was Hollywood politics bleeding directly into the creative process, and the results were predictably disastrous, audiences noticed. They weren't just upset about casting choices or a rewritten Snow White, they were tired of being preached to. Increasingly, fans expressed frustration that their beloved childhood stories were being turned into political statements. As the phrase "go woke, go broke" trended online, Snow White's implosion became a prime example. Instead of offering escapism, magic, and wonder, the things that Disney built its empire on, the new Snow White felt more like a college lecture. Meanwhile, Brett Cooper's version of the story was gaining momentum. Her film leaned hard into traditional storytelling. No politics, no lectures, just a simple fairy tale about kindness, love, and inner strength. In interviews, Cooper emphasized her respect for the source material, promising audiences a version of Snow White that celebrated what made the original so timeless. Whether or not Cooper's movie will be a massive success remains to be seen, but what's clear is that her approach struck a chord with many who felt alienated by Hollywood's recent trends. The fallout for Rachel Zegler has been severe. Rumors are swirling that several major studios are hesitant to work with her moving forward, fearful that her outspoken political stances and the stigma of Disney's Snow White could alienate audiences in future projects. Meanwhile, Brett Cooper finds herself in a strange new position. While many celebrate her as a champion of traditional storytelling, she also risks being pigeonholed into political labels that could limit her appeal outside of conservative circles. Both actresses are navigating treacherous waters, each carrying the baggage of a divided cultural moment. For Hollywood, the lessons from Snow White are impossible to ignore. Studios are now facing a hard choice: continue chasing trendy social commentary, or return to the simple goal of entertaining as many people as possible. Snow White showed that audiences aren't opposed to modern updates. They're opposed to feeling like they're being lectured. They don't want every character to become a political statement. They just want to enjoy a good story. The failure of Snow White is bigger than just one movie. It's a wake-up call for the entire industry. It's a sign that audiences are growing increasingly weary of films that prioritize messaging over magic. It's a warning that studios can no longer afford to ignore the basic desires of their customers: great storytelling, emotional connection, and yes, a little bit of fairy tale wonder. Looking ahead, the success or failure of Brett Cooper's Snow White and the Evil Queen could set the tone for future adaptations. If her traditional take performs well, it could trigger a major shift back toward classic, straightforward storytelling. If it fails, it might confirm Hollywood's worst fear: that audiences have been so burned out by controversy that they're no longer interested in revisiting these classic tales at all. No matter what happens next, one thing is certain: the fairy tale landscape has changed forever. Snow White, once a simple story about love, jealousy, and redemption, has now become a symbol of a much larger cultural battle over the purpose of storytelling itself. As one viral comment put it perfectly, "The irony isn't lost on me that a story about finding the fairest one of all has become the ugliest fight in Hollywood." Whether this controversy ultimately leads to better, more thoughtful adaptations, or deeper divisions among audiences, remains to be seen. But either way, the lesson is clear. Audiences don't just want to be included, they want to be enchanted. They want to believe, once again, in the magic of a good story well told. And if Hollywood isn't careful, it may find that in chasing political trends, it lost the very soul that made people fall in love with these stories in the first place. When fairy tales stop being magical, audiences stop believing. Maybe it's time for Hollywood to remember the real magic again. What do you think? Should Hollywood stick closer to the originals, or is it time for new stories entirely? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, hit that like button if you want more deep dives like this, and don't forget to subscribe, because this story is just the beginning.